美国总统特朗普发动对伊朗战争，却被江教授预言美国必败。江教授是预测历史频道的明星，他用博弈论分析地缘政治。2024年他就预测3件事：特朗普胜选，对伊朗开战，美国将惨败，改变世界格局。这位美国总统特朗普自以为军力无敌，伊朗准备20年视美为大撒旦，他们有胡塞、黎巴嫩真主党代理。去年6月12日战测试美伊攻击力8个月来完善策略，攻击海湾国家能源水厂5万美元，无人机毁沙特水厂，1000万人口城市，2周断水，90%食物来自胡塞控制区，美国导弹100万美元，拦截11枚全失，美军耗尽，弹药经济崩溃在即，这是霸权的窒息时刻。江教授坚定预言，伊朗优势明显，美国将面临毁灭性打击，但不料真相远超想象，话音未落，反转就来了。让我们来看江教授怎么说。
What have you seen so far that leads you to sort of stand firm in that conclusion?
So, given my analysis of how the war is progressing, I think that Iran has many more advantages over the United States. The reality is that right now, it's a war of attrition between the United States and Iran, and the Iranians have been preparing 20 years for this conflict. In their eschatology, in their religion, this is a war against the great Satan. They've had many practice runs. Last June was a 12-day war when the Iranians were able to examine and analyze the strike capacities of both the Israelis and the Americans. And they've had a lot of time, 8 months, to prepare fully for this new attack. They, through their proxies, the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Shia militias, have been able to really grasp the American mentality, and now they have a pretty good strategy of how to weaken and ultimately destroy the American empire. So what the Iranians are doing is they're waging war against the entire global economy. And so they are striking the GCC countries. And not only are they striking GCC countries, American bases, but they're going after the critical energy infrastructure of these bases. They blocked off the Strait of Hormuz. And eventually, they will go after the water desalination plants, which is the lifeblood of these nations because they don't have fresh water supply. In fact, the water desalination plants provides 60% of the GCC's water supply. So if a drone, and these drones cost $50,000, if they wiped out a desalination plant in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and it's a city of 10 million people, right? They'd be out of water in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks. And right now, the Iranians have de facto closed off the Strait of Hormuz, and the GCC gets 90% of its food from the Strait of Hormuz. So I know a lot of people are talking about the disruptions to the global economy, but right now, the Iranians are actually threatening the very existence of Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, Qatar. And why this is important is that the Gulf states are really the linchpin of the American economy. So what they do is they sell petrodollars and then they recycle the petrodollars back into the American economy through the investments in the stock market. And right now, we know that the entire American economy is propped up by AI investments in data centers. And a lot of that comes from the Gulf states. So if the Gulf states are no longer able to sell oil, and they're no longer able to finance AI, this AI bubble in the United States, then this AI bubble will burst, and with it will burst as well the entire American economy, which is really a financial Ponzi scheme.
Right.
So that's a dire situation that the Americans are facing right now.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, sir, an Amazon data center was literally hit in the UAE. And now, of course, big tech companies, which were looking at the UAE as a major potential data center investment hub with cheap and abundant energy, probably going to be rethinking that. We also wanted to talk to you about munitions. We can put this next one up here on the screen. The United States is racing to accomplish Iran mission before munitions run out. This is specifically around interceptor math. There's a famous video just from yesterday in Israel, which shows a single Iranian ballistic missile, which is being targeted by some 11 different interceptors, all of which miss. Most of those come from the United States, not to mention all of the different bases, the GCC countries that you just talked about, and the asymmetry of the cost. It's $1 million for a missile, tens of millions per interceptor in some of these cases. With these munitions running out, how does that change the global picture? So you're in China, obviously, much of the stocks in Asia of the United States are likely to have to be cannibalized if this were to go on. How is that going to affect the global picture here?
Right. So my first point is that the United States military is not designed to fight a 21st century war. Remember, the military-industrial complex came to being after World War II, and it was designed to fight the Cold War. And the Cold War was really about muscle flexing, about who was able to send people up into space, who was the first to get the person on the moon, who had the more complex missile systems. And so the entire American military strategy revolves around very sophisticated technology that costs a lot of money to build, and that's what the American air defense system is basically, and that's why we're seeing this asymmetry, as you point out, in this war, where you have these $1 million missiles trying to take out these $50,000 drones, and it's not sustainable in the long term. And so what we're seeing is really the puncturing of the aura of invincibility and invisibility that sustained American hegemony for the past 20 years, especially after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And this is really a reordering of not just the global economy, because this signals the collapse of the petrodollar, and with it, the entire US dollar-based reserve currency system, but also the global hegemony of the United States. We're moving towards a multipolar world.
Professor, this morning, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth was asked a question about potential ground troops in Iran. He refused to rule out that possibility. And he said, oh, well, we're not going to project to you what we will or will not do, but we don't want to, rule anything out. We will do what it takes. Do you think that America will end up invading Iran from the ground, since it's already becoming relatively clear they won't be able to accomplish the goal of regime change or even regime collapse using just air power alone?
Right. So everyone says that the worst calamity that could happen in the United States is if it were to send ground troops into Iran. At the same time, the United States are committed to regime change in Iran. We've never had a precedent in history where you were able to regime change from the air alone. You need ground troops. And so unfortunately, what's going to happen over the next few months is that pressure will build on America to send ground troops, especially from the GCC countries and from Israel, which are being pounded right now by the Iranians. So remember that if the GCC countries, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, Bahrain, if they go, then the petrodollar goes with them. So the Americans need to protect these countries, and these countries are going to demand that either the Americans bribe the Iranians to cease, and this is like $5 trillion in indemnity, okay? Or send ground troops to wipe out the Iranian threat once and for all. And I know that there's no political will for ground troops to be used against Iran among the American people. But remember that 78% of American people was against initial strikes against Iran in the first place.
Because it still feels to me like there's some pieces that don't totally add up. You had, in advance of this war on Iran, you had top military brass, up to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, saying, this is a really bad idea. We are not ready for this. All the math on the interceptors that's been talked about for months at this point. And yet Trump still decided to go ahead. What is the calculus that he was making here that led him to take what already appears to be catastrophic actions?
Right. Okay. So this is the key question. Why do they do this? I think there are three possibilities. Okay. And I think all three possibilities are valid. The first is the idea of hubris. If you look at history, this is how empires behave. So the Mindoro kidnapping was quick, successful, and it was adrenaline rush for Trump. And that made him overconfident in the capacity of the American military. Okay, so hubris is a factor, and we see this throughout history. Why did Hitler invade Stalin? Because he conquered Europe really easily, and he thought he was invincible, right? And that led to the destruction of the German army in the Soviet Union. So hubris is a factor. Then you have to look at internal political calculus, where even though America does not benefit from this war against Iran, Trump himself personally benefits. Why? Because the Saudis and the Israelis are bribing him to attack Iran. Remember that the Saudis invested $2 billion in the private equity fund of Jared Kushner, who is the son-in-law of Donald Trump. And the Israelis, through Miriam Adelson, have been financing Trump's political career, right? So Miriam Adelson, a few months back, said that she will put up $250 million if Trump were to run a third term. So Trump is getting a lot of financial and political support from the Saudis and the Israelis. Also remember that if this war goes sideways and Trump is forced to use ground troops, he will probably get approval from Congress, and this will give him emergency war powers, which will allow him to influence the midterms. So Trump is thinking about a third term. And I think at the ballot box, he probably won't get it. But if there's a war going on and you can delay elections and you have emergency war powers and people rally around the flag, then he probably will get a third term. And the last factor that is very important is the eschatological factor, where if you look at the Epstein files, it's clear that we are run by secret societies. It's clear that the world is run by these individuals who have a lot of power. We don't know who they are, but they control the military. They control the national security apparatus. And these people, there are different names for these people. You can call them the Illuminati. And the Illuminati are composed of three major groups, okay? You have the Jesuits, who control the Vatican. You have the Septine Frankists, which control the modern state of Israel today. And you have the Freemasons, which control the national security apparatus of the United States. And they believe that Israel, this war in the Middle East, is key to the end times in creating heaven on earth. So it's almost like a script that they're following, even though it doesn't make any geopolitical sense. Okay, so I would say that these three are the best reasons why this is happening.
看完江教授的分析，真是震撼。我看完后心里热血沸腾，又理性冷静。我们华人海外总盼中国被世界尊重。江教授用博弈论戳破美国神话，这就是典型的霸权焦虑。美国军工体系源自二战后，冷战专搞肌肉秀、登月导弹比拼，花巨资建高科技，却打不赢21世纪战争。5万美元伊朗无人机对100万美元美导弹，11枚拦截全 miss， 成本不对称，就像街头混混拿金砖砸乞丐，乞丐是伊朗农夫守家园，混混是美国，挥霍家底还属我们中国。早看透这零和博弈，伊朗准备20年代理人，网遍中东海湾6国，6成水靠拖延场回忆场，1000万人断水2周，9成食物靠胡塞通道，只有美元循环断 ，AI 泡沫爆，美国股市全靠海湾前撑。我们深知历史上有法则，特朗普为何执意开战？第一坑叫傲慢、自大、绑架成功，肾上腺素上头，如希特勒征服欧洲。入侵苏联全军覆没。第二坑叫政治算计，沙特投2亿美元给库什纳基金，以色列女婿阿德尔森捐2500万美元，战争拖长的国会暂时权力，延迟选举谋第三任。第三坑叫阴谋操控，光明会、耶稣会、共济会操盘，以色列中东关键末日剧本上演。7成8美国人不愿打伊朗，江教授逐一拆解，大快人心。我们中国70年和平发展，消除绝对贫困。一代人完成全球800多美军基地，却管不住中东伊朗战，标志多极世界来临。石油美元崩，储备货币转移，就像历史周期率盛极必衰。罗马帝国、英国霸权皆如此。中国5000年文明讲求和谐共赢，不搞霸凌，只求互利。这场战争证明中国道路正确，我们华人自豪中国崛起，历史车轮滚滚向前。美国霸权终结，多极世界正义一方胜出。